Welcome to Pass I On, the podcast with Dr. Shawn M. Nicholson, entrepreneur, author, and thought leader. In each episode, Dr. Shawn takes you on a profound exploration, guiding you to activate your passion, unlock your potential, and discover your true purpose. This podcast isn't just a collection of words, it's a path towards a life of abundance. Get ready to dive into thought-provoking discussions, engage with expert guests, and tap into Dr. Shawn's unparalleled wisdom. With each episode, you'll be provided building blocks necessary for sustainability and success. Are you ready to embark on this incredible journey of self-discovery and transformation? Well, get your pad and pen and text a friend. Pass I On with Dr. Shawn is on in 3, 2, 1. Dr. Shawn, take it away.
Welcome back to Pass I On, the podcast. I am your host, Dr. Shawn M. Nicholson, and today we kick off something I believe is going to shift your leadership walk forever. This is episode 1 of a new series I'm calling Lead Different, the 5M Blueprint for Disruptive Leadership. Woo, disruptive leadership. Over the next 5 weeks, I'm going to walk you through a leadership framework that I've built and literally have lived through. One that has been tested in the classroom, in the boardroom, and even in the wilderness seasons of life, right? And I'm just excited to be able to share this theory, philosophy, concept with each one of you leaders that are listening on today. Now, before we get into the 5 M's, I just want to kind of lay the foundation of what this is going to look like. The 5 M's for the framework is mindset, mission, market, movement, and multiplication. That's mindset, mission, market, movement, and multiplication. And throughout today and the next 5 weeks, we will break down each component of this framework. Now, we have to start here. The question I must ask you that are listening and viewing on today is, what does it really mean to lead different? What does it really mean to lead different? And secondly, what is disruptive leadership? Just think about that. What does it really mean to lead different? And what is disruptive leadership? Now, when I think of disruptive concepts, the first thing that comes to mind is Uber. Uber took over the industry with a disruptive framework that took cabs, the traditional cabbie, and totally, just overpowered the industry through rideshare. Another thing that comes to mind is Netflix. Netflix did the same thing with Blockbuster. These are disruptive business practices. And in order to have disruptive business practice, you got to lead different. You got to do things different. So in my mind, in order to have disruptive leadership, you got to lead different. You got to do things different. Now, I remember, and before I say, here's a disclaimer. So I've done a lot of things throughout my life. I just recently celebrated my 53rd birthday, so I'm excited about that. And there's been a lot of transitions and flows through the past 30 years. And I've been an entrepreneur since 1998. As far as officially, I was the paper boy, I was the one shoveling snow. So I've always had that entrepreneur mindset and work ethic. However, professionally, it's been close to 30 years now, and I have experienced a lot of things. Now, when I come and I talk and I give information and advice, I'm coming from a couple different worlds here, because I've also had the pleasure of serving the church for right around 30 plus years as well. And 15 of that was as a senior pastor for a church that I planted. And I have been able to intersect business and ministry together in everything that I do, whether it's out in the marketplace or it's in the faith-based world. Now, with that being said, I've had to create a certain mindset that I didn't just do the status quo. I had to do things that would stand out. I had to do things that people would remember. I had to do things that would be effective for those that I was leading. Hence, the reason why I'm so passionate about the things that I do, because I believe I am a servant, whether it's serving the church, as it were, or is serving the marketplace. I'm still a servant. This is why I have really trademarked the word passion as I break it down into pass I on, because I believe that God has gifted me and has given me certain things that I am obligated and responsible to pass it on to each one of you, those that I'm coming in contact with. All right. So now, with that kind of disclaimer or backstory, let's get into this. Now, I can remember, and I'm not going to go in detail with names and different things, because although I've been self-employed, I've also had jobs as well, and most of which have been leadership positions. And a lot of my experience has come from those leadership positions, even in the C-suite, as well as the church and positions and elevations within the church. Now, I can remember sitting at a long, polished conference table, and everyone looked sharp. I mean, suits pressed, the dialogue, the jargon was flowing, but not a single soul said what really needed to be said. These are the types of meetings that, you come and you throw stuff on the wall to see if it's going to stick, and then you talk about it, or you come and have the same meeting twice, which, by the way, I do not like having the same meeting twice. And I had just been promoted, and on paper, I had arrived, right? But in my spirit, I was really conflicted. Now, because I realized that I had mastered playing the part, okay? But I had not been invited to change the play. Now, listen closely with what I'm saying. I was in rooms that was full of leaders, but it was empty of leadership. There were policies, no doubt. There were performance reviews. There were quarterly goals, but no passion, no innovation, no real accountability. Everyone was managing. No one was moving anything forward. No visionary. That was my wake-up call then. So traditional leadership rewards comfort. It rewards complacency. It even rewards conformity. Now, it teaches leaders to maintain systems, but not question them, to perform, but not to pivot, to survive the politics, but not really solve real problems. One of the things in my work career that used to really aggravate me is we would have something to do and people would omit from doing it, because it's like, well, this is just job security. So I don't have to do it today because that means I have a job tomorrow. And I felt that that was the most ridiculous thing ever. Let's get it done and move to the next thing, right? Not just let's milk it. And so we end up with leaders who show up, but they don't speak up. Leaders that check boxes, but they don't challenge the norms. Leaders that inherit platforms, but they never activate purpose. That's not leadership. Truth be told, that's legacy erosion, right? So I made the decision that I would not just lead to be safe, but I would lead to be significant. I would become what I wish I had, a leader bold enough, here it is, to disrupt the ordinary. That's the call. That's the movement. That's what it means to lead different. Now, before we can fully unpack destructive leadership, we need to pause and really confront the hard truth. And here it is. Traditional leadership is no longer enough. Traditional leadership is no longer enough. I don't care if it's nonprofit, faith-based, the marketplace, private companies, public companies, whatever the case may be, leadership is no longer enough. It's not that it never worked. It's that the world it was designed for no longer exists. Now, let's talk about what traditional leadership actually is and why it's failing us. And I even go far to say that why it has failed us. Now, traditional leadership is an authority-based model that relies on hierarchy, it relies on control, it relies on predictability. Now, hey, in the comment section, if I'm stepping on your toes, just say ouch. If I am walking down your street, just, put a like or a heart or something. Just let me know that you feel what I'm saying, because this is the model that we have conformed to. This is the model that we have adapted our lives to. Traditional leadership is authority-based model that relies on hierarchy, control, and predictability. And the thing about that is everybody doesn't have it. Everybody doesn't get to see it, but everyone feels it. Now, it centers around this: leadership by position, not purpose. I go and I train companies and do leadership development, and I find out that people are in position not because they were the best person for the position, but they were loyal to the company. They weren't even qualified, but they were loyal. So people are in leadership positions, but that's not their purpose. Then we have management over movement. We have control over collaboration. We have safety over significance. Systems over servanthood. What are we doing? Now, here's the problem with this model in today's world. It resists change because, have you ever heard this before? This is how we've always done it. And I think when a person makes that statement, that is literally the funeral home or the funeral of innovation. This is how we've always done it. And then we hear it silence voices because only the top speaks, while creativity and culture suffer. It values output over authenticity. That's how burnout becomes mass as a high performance. And I've experienced this. I've experienced all of this. And what it does is it creates survivors, not servants. Leaders survive the system, but they never transform the system. Now, a few years ago, I wrote a book entitled Teach Me How to Pivot. It's an acronym. It stands for Planning, Innovation, Vision, Outweigh Threats. And in that, one of the main things that I discuss is having a pivot mindset. So let me show you the mindset shift, because you have a growth mindset, you have a fixed mindset, right? And a growth mindset is, I want to learn more. I may have learned it this way. I may have done it this way. This may be my worldview. But now, how do I advance, or how do I become better? How do I do do more out of what I have been given, right? And so when you think about a pivot mindset, you're not afraid to shift. You're not afraid to change the status quo. You're not afraid to say, okay, enough is enough. I got to move this way. Now, let me show you something. Tradition says, I'm in charge. That's what tradition says. Well, disruptive says, I'm responsible for change. You see the shift there? Tradition says, let's play it safe. Disruptive says, let's play it real. Tradition says, let's lead by the book. You've heard that before? Disruptive says, let's lead by the blueprint of purpose. This is exactly why I have created the 5M framework for disruptive leadership. Mindset, we think different. Mission, we lead with conviction. Market, we solve the right problems. Movement, we build what mobilizes others. And lastly, multiplication, we got to scale what's going to outlive us. Now, let me ask you this. Where have you been leading traditionally and calling it leadership? Where have you been leading traditionally and calling it leadership? What system, mindset, or metric do you need to disrupt right now? This is your invitation today to lead different. Here it is. We got to lead different. We're living in a fast-paced world. Things are changing all around us. And it's time for us, for you, for me rather, to lead different. That's the call. That's the charge. That's the challenge that each one of us have. And what I like about it, everyone can do it. Everyone can do it. Leadership is something that can be taught. Yes, sometimes we have these innate characteristics, these attributes that help us to excel in the leadership, but leadership can be taught. Through this journey, I've learned that it's time to activate your passion, your potential, and your purpose. It's time to do that because passion is something that everyone has. You are passionate about something. Each one of you has the potential to do whatever it is that you desire to do. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's untapped potential to do these things. So when your passion meets that untapped potential, and then you align those two together, this is when you discover what your purpose is. And isn't it a wonderful thing to leave or live life on purpose? Listen, we're going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to come back and get into a little bit more of the lead different, disruptive leadership, the 5M, the framework for disruptive leadership. All right? We'll be right back. All right, all right. We're back. We're back. We had to make some changes there. Had some issues with with the microphone, but hey, this is live, so that's what happens when it's live, right? But we trust that you are getting something out of what we're talking about. And The theme of this series, this special series, is lead different, the 5M blueprint for disruptive leadership. And for those of you that are just joining in, I just explained what disruptive leadership is to me and how that traditional leadership is failing us. And we have to take the stand and understand that disruptive leadership is really um, it's a it's an intentional dismantling. And so this segment, we want to go into more detail about what that looks like. Now, when we talk about, I mentioned to you the 5 M's, right? And throughout the next 5 weeks, we'll be really breaking down and dissecting what those M's stand for because they mean something and it's very relevant to what it is that um, you have to understand in order to have one, a pivot mindset, but also to have this disruptive leadership mentality. And as I mentioned prior to the break, the 5M framework for disruptive leadership simply talks about mindset, which means we got to think different, right? And if we think different, we do different. Okay. The mission of that is that we have to lead with conviction. Got to lead with conviction. Market is the third M, which simply says that we have to solve the right problems. We got to solve the right problems. Movement, build what mobilizes others. It's impossible to be able to do this alone. We got to mobilize those that are working with us and those that we're leading. And then the fifth thing is multiplication. We have to create models, or rather systems, that will scale so well that it will outlive us. And there's several examples of systems that have outlived the people that created. Take Ford, for instance. Take um, um, who was it? Ford. Take Quaker Oats, for instance. Quaker Oats. Take Hershey. These are people that have created systems, and these systems have outlived them. And now their kids and their kids and their kids get to reap the benefits of it. And ultimately, what happens with this is we do create what we refer to as wealth creation. It all boils down to the revenue at the end of the day. Okay. So now let's get into it. We talked about why the traditional leadership model is failing us. So now that we understand the reasons why it's failing us, let's see how that we can fix it. Okay. One thing that I've learned, whenever you have a problem or a challenge, you got to come up with solutions. If you just talk about problems and talk about problems, that becomes complaining about it, especially when you don't have any solutions or any ideas on how to fix it. We're problem solvers. This is what we're poised to do in this space, in this season. And so I've created this model, this framework, to help you solve the traditional leadership problems that I know each one of you are facing, have faced, or will face in the future. Now, disruptive leadership is the intentional dismantling of outdated mindset, outdated models, and outdated methods. I'll say that again. Disruptive leadership is the intentional dismantling of outdated mindsets, models, and methods. Now, in order to build leadership that is authentic, leadership that's purpose driven, leadership that is people first and positioned to make a lasting impact, we got to disrupt some things here. Now, let me introduce you to the 5M framework. And like I said, over the next 5 weeks, we'll break down each one of those M's, the letter M. Mindset, clarity, courage, confidence, mission, integrity, calling, conviction, market, relevance, results, movement, influence, and integrity, and multiplication, systems, scale, and sustainability. Now, when we look at mindset, we have to be purposeful to shift our mindset, our way of thinking. And the first way that that happens, we have to understand that, first of all, there's a problem. And I believe if we take a poll today, each one of you would agree that we have a leadership problem. Now, whether the leadership problem is countrywide, which it is, whether it's in our local jobs, it's in our um, localities, our civic associations, our churches, our nonprofits. We can scope all around and find that there are leadership problems, largely because, now here's to the defense of the individuals. There's problems because the systems or the model is broken. It's antiquated. It's no longer effective for the time that we're living in today. There's so many things that are taking place. I'm going to talk about AI in a little while, but automation and things that we have now that we never had before. Now, my wheelhouse for years have been workforce development and training, and I have seen a downward spiral from workforce from back in the early 70s up to the late 80s, coming into the 90s. Workforce was solid, largely because of vocation. Yes, there was some tech stuff, computer science, engineering, and other things, but for the at large, it was vocation. It was carpentry, electrical, welding, plumbing, concrete, masonry, all of these different things. And that literally built the economy, manufacturing, warehousing. We would refer to it as the blue collared worker, right? Well, these individuals that have graduated in the 60s and 70s are considered the baby boomers, right? And now these baby boomers are sunsetting, they're retiring, they're aging out, they're dying even. And because there was a 20-year, 2-decade gap, in my opinion, of not training another workforce to take the place of those baby boomers, it's dying out. I'm a Gen X, came in right behind the baby boomers. We learn skills, we learn trades, we learn work ethics, we learn what to do, how to do, when to do it. Simply, we learned to play the part. That's what we did. Now, it helped us, don't get me wrong. However, those millennials that we birthed, those Gen X, those Gen Zs that we birthed, are coming behind us in a fragmented system. So not only do we have a workforce now that is dwindling and not being replaced, we have an economy, a world that is transforming before our very eyes, and we are not able to keep up with it. But we're still trying to operate in the same mold, the same model that we did decades ago. It's not going to work. The system is broken. The model is fragile, it's fragmented, it's antiquated. It's time to lead different. And in order to lead different, we're going to have to disrupt the leadership model. One thing that I had to come into the realization is that I will no longer operate under the traditional leadership model. It's not effective, for one. Yes, it has done well up to a certain point. Yes, I have made money. Yes, I have been successful. Yes, I have taught others how to do it. But that doesn't give any longevity because everything is still changing. And I go back to the reference of the book, Teach Me How to Pivot. We have to now be in the mindset that it's time to pivot. And the great thing about pivoting, all of us can do it. We just have to have the tools, the resources, and the things that will help us to pivot to the next level, right? And I don't know about you, but I want to go to the next level. So mindset is the first thing. You got to have clarity of what's going on. You got to have courage to not be part of the status quo, to not color in between the lines, to be able to think outside the box, right? To have confidence in the things that you do. We're in the middle. We're not the middle, but we're in a time of AI, right? Artificial intelligence, um, automation. We're in a time of economic disruption. We're in a time of generational leadership gaps, right? In a workforce, we can have someone that's 60, 65, 70 years old, as well as 20, 25, 30 years old, competing for the same positions. People are looking for real leaders, not titles, but real leaders. Disruptive leadership answers this moment because what happens, it it recenters identity. And not only does it recenter identity, it centers impact. Here's the thing. You can outsource many things, right? You can farm it out, different jobs, different tasks, different assignments. But what you cannot outsource is disruption. You must become the disruption first. Can't outsource it. It has to start with you. That's what disruptive leadership is all about. Taking the stand. You know, when I was a when I was growing up, I was a cartoon fanatic, and they had a character. I think it was one of the Warner Brothers cartoons. It was with Bugs Bunny, and there was a character. I can't think of it. I think it was Yosemite Sam. I think that's who it was. And one thing that comes to mind that he used to say, I think it was Yosemite Sam. But anyway, the point is, he would say, "I've take all that I took all I can stand, and I can't stand no more." And that's how I feel right there. I've taken all I can stand, and I can't stand no more. It's time to lead different. I did a leadership conference early March this year. And it was successful, I feel. At least the attendees um, commented that it was successful. We had some great speakers, leaders that came and gave their story, and it was productive. It was very productive. However, I was unhappy with the results. Even though people said it was good, even though we had great reviews, I wasn't happy with the outcome. I felt the material was noteworthy, it was relevant. I felt that the time that we shared the material with the individuals that attended, the registrants, it was good. I really felt it was good. However, I was still unhappy. And so it bothered me because I know I'm my worst critic, and I'm always going to be hard on myself. But I couldn't shake this because although we got good reviews, good responses, the outcome was good from this. I just felt that I did not pass enough of eye on, if that makes sense. So I had to take a step back and really, I spent some time in this real talk, spent some time praying. spend some time reevaluating my purpose, why I'm here. I took some time to really do an internal audit, being transparent, to do an internal audit as to what went wrong. What could I have done better? What did I miss? Because I was just doing another leadership summit. And I don't want to be categorized as another leadership summit. I don't want to be like everybody else. And what I'm finding in this leadership space, most of the information that is being shared is regurgitated information. It's stuff that I'm saying, this person saying, that person saying, the same person 20 years ago said, and it's not changing anything for today's model or for today's economy. So I dealt with that thing, and I spent some time, as I mentioned, praying and saying, look, I got to change this. This is not what I don't want to go down as being just another leadership guru or thought leader that's doing the same thing everybody else is doing. And I know that my business model is not like everyone else. So I kind of started dealing with that. And I said, okay, well, what I've been doing for years is showing people and teaching people how to do what I did. I've been teaching and training the outcome. I have not been teaching and training the process. And that's when it hit me. In order for me to be this disruptive leader, I have to lead different. And the way that I decided to lead different is to train the process, not the outcome. Because if the truth be told, everyone's outcome should be different because we're different. We're in different spaces, different sectors, right? But the principles, the framework, they can still be the same. This is why disruptive leadership is so important. And my responsibility is to be able to continue to pass on and to activate your passion, your potential, and your purpose to say something, to do something, to teach something, to show you something that will cause you to lead different. And the first step to leading different is to understand that disruptive leadership is necessary. We got to break down these old models. Don't be afraid to build what's next. That's leading different. Don't be afraid to disrupt the ordinary. Don't be afraid to lead different. That's what I am saying to you on today. Now, the challenge is this. You have to first start with yourself. You have to disrupt yourself, your mindset, the way that you used to do things, your worldview. That has to be disrupted. Ask yourself these three questions. One, where am I leading safely? Where am I leading safely? Two, where am I performing instead of pivoting? Where am I performing instead of pivoting? And then lastly, what belief do I need to release to lead differently? What belief do I need to release to lead differently? Those are the questions that I'm challenging you with today. These are the questions that, if answered, you can begin to disrupt yourself. You can begin to lead different. You can begin to create this destructive or disruptive leadership. Those of you that know me, I'm very big on confessions as it relates to affirmations and speaking things into existence. And I have this affirmation that I do, and I want to share it with you. And this is what I say on a day-to-day basis. And it's this: I am called to lead different, not louder, but deeper, not faster, but more faithfully. Each one of you has an obligation to utilize your gifts, your talents, your skill sets to make this world better. You have been equipped with everything that you need to fulfill your purpose. You would not have these gifts and talents if it was not for the benefit of your purpose, the reason why you are on earth today. So say it with me. I am called to lead different, not louder, but deeper, not faster, but more faithfully. Are you a good steward over the gifts and the talents that you have been blessed to have? That's my question to you on today. Are you a good steward of the gifts and the talents that you have been given to lead different, to live life on purpose, to fulfill your destiny? Are you being a good steward of those gifts and talents? Is the question. Just think about it, or even put it in the chat. Something to think about. Now, next week, we're going to go deep, deep, like Teddy Riley and Blackstreet say. We're going deep. And we're going to talk about the first M, mindset. I just wanted today to give you an overview of what we're going to be looking at, what we're going to be talking about. Lead different, right? The 5M framework for disruptive leadership. Now, if this episode resonated with you, share it with one leader that you know. Just one. Share it with one leader that you know. And then grab what we're going to have is a companion workbook that you'll be able to access for deeper growth. And that's going to be on the link in the bio. Okay. So you can download. It's a free workbook that you can download, and you can follow along. You can take notes along with every episode that we have. Now, remember, the future doesn't belong to those who maintain. It belongs to those who lead different. We're not managers. We're leaders. That's what this is all about. We got to lead different. We have to disrupt the ordinary, lead with passion, and build with purpose. So as I recap, understand that this is the new wave of thinking, if you will. Lead different. And I'm going to explain and teach you the 5M blueprint, I call it, for disruptive leadership. Mindset, mission, market, movement, and multiplication. Now, there are courses that we have available. If you want to schedule a discovery call, you can do that. All the information is on the link in the podcast, in the bio. We want to help you. We want to help you to lead different. We want to help you again to disrupt the ordinary, help you to lead with passion, help you to build with purpose. Now, remember, pass I on the podcast with Dr. Shawn Nicholson every week every Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. on whichever platforms that you get your podcasts. But I would like for you to subscribe, rate, and share this movement, specifically on our YouTube channel. You can visit us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts at. But for the most impact for me, I'm encouraging you to subscribe, to like, to share to our YouTube channel. This is a movement that we're fastly on our way. Listen, we got some merch that you'll be able to purchase, t-shirts like I have on, disruptive leadership. Every phrase or catchphrase that we have for that is available for purchase. And definitely our Teach Me How to Pivot book. I think that's a good resource for you. Teach Me How to Pivot. Planning, innovation, vision outweigh threats. Very powerful book for both the marketplace as well as the faith-based community, and even just the average Joe, if you will. It takes us through a journey on how crisis and tragedy and things come up that are beyond our control, and how if we have that pivot mindset where we're able to pivot and still be okay, and that's the goal, to be okay. All right. To be successful, to be sustainable, to live life on purpose. That's our goal. Okay. Well, listen, that's our time for today. We thank you for joining in to Pass I On, the podcast with Dr. Shawn M. Nicholson. I'm your host, and I'm excited to introduce you to this movement, the Lead Different movement. It's time for disruptive leadership. Are you going to come along with us? Are you going to join us? All right. Well, until the next time, remember, passion is the ability to pass I on. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to another captivating episode of Pass I On, the podcast with Dr. Shawn M. Nicholson. As we wrap up this episode, we hope you've learned a lesson you can start living today. Stay tuned for more incredible stories of passion, potential, and purpose in future episodes. If you enjoyed today's conversation, follow us on all social media platforms at Dr. Shawn M. Nicholson. Don't forget to subscribe, and most importantly, share this podcast with at least 5 people in your life. Until next time, remember, passion isn't a secret to be kept. It's the ability to pass I on.